So we have done with the financial options, payable system setup, and next one is the payable options. So are you good so far?
Yes.
Okay. So as far as the payable options is concerned, there are a lot of tabs. So whatever is significant and whatever is important, I'll cover. Okay. Okay. The first thing is payment accounting, accounting for a payment, accounting for gain or loss, automatic offset method, interest, discount method, and prepayment. So first we'll start with the accounting for payment. When do you want to make a payment? When the payment is issued, so there are two check boxes here. Whether when do you want to make a payment for the, when do you want to account for a payment, when the payment is issued or when the payment is cleared. If you are using the cash management module, and if you want to use a bank reconciliation functionality, generally you go for account for payment, you check the checkbox instead of this checkbox. Okay, if you are not using a cash management functionality, you just want system to allow create accounting as soon as the payment is made. So you check the checkbox of when payment is issued. So as soon as the payment is generated from our system, you are allowing system to do an accounting for that particular payment. So as you are checking the checkbox of when payment is issued for the account for payment, even for the gain or loss also, in general we'll check the same checkbox, this one, when payment is issued, account for gain or loss. And with regard to automatic offset method, so there are three values here: none, balancing, and account. So what is the significance of these three values? So if you use say none, I mean obviously there is no impact. But if you go for balancing, so what will happen? I'll explain that. So as I said that whenever an invoice is created, the general entry is expense account, which is mentioned in the AP distribution, will be debited and the liability account will be credited. So this is at a high level. But if you get into the details, the general entry will be something like this: 01 company code, department, expense account is say 5450 something, sub account, product, intercompany. This is debited with $1,000 or 1,000 rupees, and then liability account 01 2210. Okay. Okay, I just want to change something here. I want to use a product code of 010 and sub account of, okay. So if you go with an automatic offset method of none, okay, let us assume this is an accounting entry. If you go with the automatic offset method of balancing, so what will happen is, as far as the liability account is concerned, so this is the liability account which it is getting derived from the your supplier side, and for the supplier side it is deriving from the financial options. Okay, and here our assumption is automatic offset method is none. But if you go for an automatic offset method of balancing, what will happen is the accounting entry will be one is the balancing and another one is the account. Automatic offset method of account, balancing, so there is a slight difference. I'm just trying to recollect that. So as far as the account is concerned, what it is doing is it is checking what exactly are the other segment values from the charge account or the expense account, and it is copying those segments to the liability account. So here you can see as far as the charge account is concerned, you got sub account of 001 and product code of 010. So even for the liability account, it has copied exactly the same values. But as far as the balancing is concerned, it is going to copy the same balancing segment as that of your charge account, and all other things are copied from the liability account. Anyways, you can better appreciate these three functionalities when we are creating the invoices. Okay, even if I try to explain this, it will be a bit confusing for you. Whether you want to use multiple currencies, obviously you want to use multiple currencies. So when you check this checkbox, you need to specify your realized gain, realized loss, or rounding differences account.
Arun, can you go back to accounting options screen tab?
Uh-huh.
Okay. The remaining tabs, discount method is it EV tax related concept?
No, this one.
Yeah.
No, discount method is not EB tax related concept. It is AP concept. So EB tax, I don't think so. There is any discount method concept in EB tax.
We can leave it as it is the default things. I mean, we don't have
Yep.
any significance on these
Yep.
three tabs.
Yep. Yep.
Okay. Okay.
So currency, use multiple currencies. And what are my realized gain or loss accounts? You can say require exchange rate entry, and exchange. What is the exchange default exchange rate type? Corporate. So whenever you are entering your foreign currency invoices, so what is the default exchange rate type or conversion rate type? So I want the default exchange rate type to be corporate. And then realized gain or realized loss account. Again, the significance of this you will understand when we try to create the foreign currency invoices. So for the time being, we'll just mention the accounts what to be used. So again, so this being a testing environment, so I copied all these values from the vision operations. Okay, so that's the currency, and then tax reporting will not do anything here. And as far as the invoicing tab is concerned, uncheck this checkbox. Confirm date as an invoice number. I do not know why Oracle has given this particular functionality. If you check this checkbox, whenever you enter your invoice number will be by default your system date. So if today's date is system date, if you check the checkbox automatically, when you tab it out, invoice number automatically date will be populated. Generally, invoice number should be an invoice number, not a date. So because invoice number you need to manually enter in the system when you get that invoice from the supplier. So don't check the checkbox. Allow online validation if you want an invoice to be validated. So in AP, whenever you are creating an invoice, the first step is after creating of the invoice, the first step is you need to validate the particular invoice. So when you click on a button called validate, it will try to internally cross check couple of things, and if there are any issues it will throw appropriate error message. So either you can validate invoices one by one, or you can run a invoice validation program which will automatically validate all the invoices available in the system. So in a single go it should be able to validate all the invoices. So check the checkbox of allow online validation so that you can even validate invoices one by one if you want. In a live environment, generally we schedule this invoice validation program overnight so that it is going to validate all the invoices available in the system or which are created on the particular day. And allow document category override. I think we need not check the checkbox. So this is basically if you are using document sequencing, and if you want to uh, a document sequence, there is something called document sequence category which will be defaulted to an invoice, and if you want to override the default value you need to check this checkbox. But we are not using the document sequencing, because our profile option sequential numbering is set as not used. So we need not even check this checkbox. So we will say this as no. And allow adjustment to paid invoices, we will say as yes. Recalculate scheduled payment also we will say it as yes. Allow remit to account, remit to supplier. So these are some of the things like wherein you want to override once it is defaulted at the invoice level. And this is also another significant thing, allow adjustment to paid invoices. If there is an invoice is created, it is validated, accounted, transferred to GL, and you already made a payment. But for some reason, that's a paid invoice now. So that is the invoice which is already paid. But for some reason, you want to change the account on that particular invoice. If you check this checkbox, then system will allow you to reverse those invoice lines and add new lines there. If you do not check this checkbox, system will not allow. Again, this could be a production support issue wherein user says that I am not able to reverse the existing invoice line, because the reason being the invoice is in a paid status. If it is in paid status, you need to check this checkbox of allow adjustments to paid invoices. So you can come back to this particular payables options at a later point in time. There are certain things here you can even change in later point in time when you start using the system. So you can come here, check this checkbox, allow the user to reverse that particular invoice, and if you want, again you can come back to this particular screen and uncheck this checkbox, or rather check this checkbox again. So in our client, we did not check this checkbox of allow adjustment to paid invoices, but on a need basis, when there is actually a specific business scenario, we'll check this checkbox, allow the user to make the required changes, come back to this particular screen, and then uncheck this checkbox.
Arvind, when you say it is checked, right?
Mm-hmm.
You mean to say the invoice is already migrated to GL and it is posted in GL, and since user come back and make it as enabled, that invoice which is already posted to GL is acceptable to make adjustments.
Okay.
In payables.
Okay, I'll explain you. So take an example. This is the journal entry. Okay, it is validated, accounted, paid, transferred to GL. Now user realized that the account should not be 5450. Account should have been say 5451. Okay, then what user can do is he can reverse this particular line. So what will happen is when you reverse this particular line, okay, and he will enter a proper line. Okay, so from a system perspective, this entry is already transferred to GL, well and good. Now when you reverse this particular line, so there will be a negative line which will be created, and he will enter one more positive line with the actual account. So this entry will also go to GL. So you are not kind of directly going here and deleting this line in GL. So system will send again this particular line to GL, and the net impact in GL is this account is debited with $1,000. It is again debited with minus $1,000. The net impact is, as far as this account is concerned, it is zero. Now the balance is lying under 5451, and as far as the liability is concerned, there is no impact. Do you understand? Make sense?
Arvind, my question is, this particular entry, the adjustment entry, is at the GL level or AP level?
This is at the AP level, and from AP it goes to GL. As I said, that user will bring up that particular invoice, query for the invoice, click on reverse button. When he is clicking on reverse button, he is reversing this particular line. Okay, and then he will be entering a proper line. Once this is done, again he is going to validate the invoice, create accounting, and once he is done with the create accounting, this entry will get transferred to GL.
No matter if that previous invoice is already in a posted status in GL also, you can reverse it?
Yes, that is possible. That is what I'm trying to say. So
okay,
here again you're checking the checkbox of allow adjustment to paid invoices. So that is the significance of this particular checkbox.
okay.
So
okay.
again this kind of restriction is not there in AP, but in AR it's a bit different. In AR, once an invoice is accounted, it's in account. There is something called complete status. Once it's completed, you cannot directly make any changes on the invoice. But the impact is like in AR, you can create something called a credit memo, which is more or less similar to whatever you're doing in AP. In AP, what you're doing is you're going to that particular invoice line, selecting the first line, clicking on that reverse button, then system will create this line, and then again re-entering this particular positive line. Okay, so the net impact is you are creating the two more adjustment line against that particular invoice. So you are not disturbing the accounting of the existing line. It is properly accounted, but you are passing a reverse impact of those accounting lines via click on the reverse button. Okay, this is one scenario. And again, you can create an invoice and it is accounted, everything is done, but you can even cancel the invoice. So when you cancel the invoice, the journal entry will be reversal of this entry. Okay, so that is also possible. You have accounted transfer to GL, but still you want to cancel the invoice, which is fine. It is possible here. And again, in AR, once an invoice is complete, you cannot cancel the invoice, but you need to pass a credit memo, which is the reversal impact. So more or less in AP and AR, we have got such kind of functionality of wherein once the invoice is accounted and transferred to GL, you can pass the reversal impact. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And this is a GL date basis. So whenever you create an invoice, whether in AP or AR, you got two dates. In GL, we have seen there is only one date, which is called GL effective date or accounting date. You can call it as a GL date or accounting date. But in AP, in all the subledger, whether it's AP and AR, you got two dates. One is the invoice date slash transaction date or GL date and GL date, sorry. Okay. So invoice date or transaction date. So from an AP perspective, invoice date is the date on which a supplier has actually given us an invoice. So take an example. Today is what, 24th of September. Say user is located, so in from India as an example. So user is located in say Hyderabad. He has generated the invoice. The supplier is located in Hyderabad. He generated the invoice. He has sent that particular invoice copy to your company. So your company is located in what, Gujarat, at the head office. Okay, it took say roughly say 2 or 3 days. So the supplier has generated the invoice. Let us assume that he has generated the invoice on 21st of September. So the date on the invoice will be 21st of September. Okay, but the date you receive is 24th of September. Okay, so invoice date will be 21st of September. GL date will be 24th of September. So generally, your GL date is depends on this. Like, how do you want the system to calculate the GL date? Whether you want the GL date to be an invoice date or system date or goods received date or system date, something like that. So either you can go for the invoice date or you can go for the system date. If I select the GL date base as system date, then in this example, my invoice will have a GL date of 24th of September. If I select an option of invoice date, then my invoice date is 21st of September and GL date is also 21st of September. It depends. Like, I've seen some clients using the GL date as invoice date, and I've seen some clients using the GL date as the system date. So let us go for system date. What else? Again, there's one more checkbox: use invoice approval workflow. Whether you want to use invoice approval workflow. If you want to use invoice approval workflow, you need to check this checkbox. If you use the checkbox of use invoice approval workflow, there is something called allow force approval. So if you check even this particular checkbox, so what will happen is all the invoices, whatever you create and require an approval, and also within the invoice window there is a checkbox called allow force approval. So that means automatically, I mean, ideally in an ideal world we will not use this particular functionality, but what will happen is you are using invoice approval workflow, but at the same time you are forcing an invoice to be approved automatically from that particular screen itself without going through the workflow. Okay, and what are the other things? Matching, as far as the matching is concerned, important thing is transfer PO descriptive flexibility information. So if you check this checkbox for PO matched invoices, if there is any DFF information available in the purchase order, by checking this checkbox, that DFF information will be transferred from PO to AP. As far as I remember, I don't think so. We got this option in 11A, but we got this option in R12 to transfer the PO descriptive flexible information to AP. And
this will be at the header level, Arvind?
Sorry?
And this, since it is a PO, it is a invoice header level, we will capture these DFF values.
I don't think so. It's header level. The reason being, generally, whenever you match your PO, you match a PO at a invoice line level, not at a header level. So one invoice can have multiple PO distribution lines.
Okay.
And we are not using this interest invoice functionality and expense report. If you are using your I expenses module to create your expenses, then you can create then you can specify like what is your default expense report template, and whether you want a system to allow prepayments to be applied against those expenses report. Otherwise you can leave this blank. And there is one more important checkbox: automatically create employee as a supplier. So what is the significance of this particular checkbox? So in AP, if you want to make a payment, whether even for a single rupee or a single dollar, you need to create an invoice and you need to make a payment. In order to create an invoice, then obviously you need to have the supplier. Without supplier, you cannot create an invoice, and without invoice, you cannot make a payment. So creation of the supplier is mandatory. So even for an employees, say take an example, there are a couple of employees who have actually gone for a on a who have gone for a what do you call official trip. So they have incurred some travel expenses. So in order to get a reimbursement of those travel expenses, so in order for a company to pay amount to the employees, he need to fill something called expense report. And once the expense report is approved, an expense report will be created as an invoice in AP. So when expense report is created as an invoice in AP, then obviously your employee should be created as a supplier. So there will be hundreds of employees available in the system, or there will be hundreds of employees in your organization who will be entering your expense report. So it is not practically not possible to create manually each of those employee as a supplier. So once you check this checkbox of automatically create employee as a supplier, then whenever they submit the expense report in the I expenses module, and when the expense report is approved, then you run a program called payable expense report import program. So once you run that particular program, automatically the expense report will be created as an invoice in AP. And during that particular process, it will create that particular employee as a supplier. The reason being, you cannot have an invoice without a supplier. So in this case, who is the supplier, or who is the person to whom we are making a payment? Employee. So as an organization, or in an organization, all the employees will be created as a suppliers who have entered the expense report. So if you do not check this checkbox, then you need to manually create those employees as suppliers. Then only you need to run that program, payable expense report import program, to import those expense reports into AP. If you do not check the checkbox, you need to create them as the suppliers and then run the program. Otherwise the program will go into error saying that this particular supplier does not exist. Okay. You can also check the checkbox apply advances. And coming back to the payments, okay, so these are the important two checkboxes: allow predate, allow void, and reissue. So allow predate is for some specific reason if you want to make a predated payments. So that is like the say any invoice is created on say 24th of August. It is due say today. Okay, so it is due what today is what 24th of September. Okay, you want to generate a check But when you are generating a check, you just want to generate with a pre-date. That is like you want to generate a check with say 23rd of September or say 20th of September. Once you check the checkbox, system will allow you to create the pre-dated payments. And the next checkbox is allow void and reissue. Void is nothing but cancelling of a payment. If you want the system to allow voiding of the payments, then you need to check this checkbox. If you do not check this checkbox, system will not allow you to void the payment. So by default, obviously, everybody should go for this particular option, because in any practical scenario, definitely there will be scenarios wherein you want to void a payments once it is issued to the supplier. I'll get into this business scenarios wherein you need to go for voiding, but from a setup perspective, you need to check the checkbox so that system will allow you to void the payments in future.
So Arvind, the pre-date is like the payment date is yesterday. You missed it yesterday and you want to pay it today.
Yes, but with the yesterday's date.
Okay, with yesterday's date, right? So
yes.
I mean, because you're saying you will generally run the payments on the last day of the payment terms, so you already missed it, right? Even
Okay.
say for example, it is 30
okay,
days.
so generally this particular functionality is used in the case of single payments, not in the payment batch. So I'll give an example. So let us assume your, okay, we'll take an example where is the invoice is dated 20th of August 2017 and it has got a 30 days payment terms and it is due on 20th of September. Okay, so ideally you are supposed to pay on or before 20th of September. You missed that, so you for some reason you realize that you did not make a payment of that particular invoice for various reasons. We'll not get into that as to why we have missed. Today is what, 24th of September. So what you can do is, you can, once you check the checkbox when you are generating a payment, you can put the date as 20th of September payment date, and now check will be generated with the date of 20th of September, and you can give it to the supplier, and then you can say to the supplier, boss, like I had already generated, say you can see the check date is on 20th of September. There are some other issues or concerns while the check is being dispatched to you. That is one of the business scenario you can think of. I mean, this is used in a very rare cases, because most of the cases you generally generate the payments on the last working on the due date, and you generally use the payment process request. But this, if you want to generate a single payment with a backdated thing, system is allowing this particular checkbox. Oh, but from an audit perspective, you say that no, these are the things which we should not allow. Then uncheck the checkbox.
Okay.
As simple as that. Okay, Oracle has given a functionality. If you do not want to use that, and if you have got some audit concern, don't check the checkbox. Okay.
Okay.
Because I have given one practical scenario as an example. There could be a lot of other business scenarios wherein you may be forced to enter the predated things. If Oracle has not given this functionality, then it could be a problem. Okay.
Okay.
Now coming to the withholding tax. Okay, I'll explain you what is withholding tax. Use withholding tax. We'll check the checkbox. Use withholding tax, and at what stage you want to apply withholding tax. At invoice validation level, create withholding tax at invoice validation level. Withholding tax. Okay, so what is this withholding tax? So in Indian terms, withholding tax is nothing but TDS, tax deducted at source. As you all know that, like for all the people who have worked in India or in any other country, whenever you get a salary, you will have something deducted from your salary as a tax, and then you will be paid the net amount. Am I right? So that amount, whatever is deducted, is called withholding tax or tax deducted at source. So similarly, as when your employer is making a payment to you, then he is deducting something. Similarly, whenever you are paying something to the supplier, law says that withheld something. Okay, and that is what is called withholding tax. So what is the business reason for withholding tax, and why we need to go for withholding tax? Okay, what law says is, take an example. I am purchasing something from the supplier for an invoice amount of say 10,000 rupees. So what law says is, for certain kind of a suppliers, okay, where withholding tax is applicable, deduct 10%. Okay. So when supplier is giving you an invoice for 10,000 rupees, what you need to do is deduct 10%, which is nothing but 1,000 rupees. Deduct 1,000 rupees from the 10,000 rupees and pay this 1,000 rupees to the income tax department or IRS in US terms, and pay 9,000 to vendor. So what you are doing is, out of rupees 10,000 rupees, 1,000 rupees you are paying to the income tax department on behalf of vendor, because you are deducting it from the vendor and paying you 9,000 rupees. So if you convert this into your salary terms, so let us assume your salary is 10,000 rupees. Okay, your employer needs to pay you 10,000 rupees. It is deducting 1,000 rupees and paying it to the income tax department, and 9,000 rupees it is paying it to you as a net salary. So from an employer perspective, he has already completed his obligation for 10,000 rupees. 1,000 rupees he is paying it to the income tax department on your behalf, and 9,000 rupees he is paying it to you. Similarly, whenever you are purchasing something from the vendor for 10,000 rupees, deduct 10%, which is 1,000 rupees, and pay it to the income tax department, and 9,000 you are paying it to the vendor. So if you go to the invoice screen, the paid state, as far as this invoice is concerned, amount paid will be entire 10,000 rupees. It will not show 9,000 rupees, because you have completed your obligation of paying the entire invoice amount. But when you are paying 1,000 rupees, you are sending it to the income tax department, and 9,000 rupees you are paying it to the vendor. So once we get into the actual invoices, I'll get into the accounting entries and how system will show the total amount as the amount paid. But at a high level, this is what is your withholding tax. Holding the withholding tax or TDS, holding the tax at the source. So that is the reason why it is called TDS, tax deducted at source level. So that is like the reason why even the government is asking for this TDS is basically your supplier is selling something, your supplier is selling 10,000 rupees worth of goods to you. So it is actually what it is income. Am I right? It is his revenue based for which he need to actually pay tax to the government. So there could be a scenario wherein a supplier may not show this 10,000 rupees in his books of accounts. So what will happen? Government will lose income tax on that particular 10,000. So that is the reason why government is putting an obligation on you, a person who is purchasing, to deduct something and pay it to the income tax department. So if you deduct something, then it is automatically and paid to the income tax department. When you are giving it to income tax department, you will say that this is the invoice which I purchased from so and so employer, and the further particular employer, this is the tax file number or your PAN number, whatever you call, and this is the amount. So that means your income tax department has already got the records of that particular supplier saying that he has already sold you 10,000 rupees. So 10,000 rupees is his income or revenue. So in future he cannot what do you call miss this particular revenue to be shown in his books of accounts. Okay, so that is the concept of withholding tax. So any questions here?
Arvind, quick question. Typically, for enabling the withholding tax, what kind of suppliers we will have a mandatory check, or which suppliers can we skip this particular option in general in the business world?
Okay, so the first thing is, in order to use the withholding tax functionality, these are actually kind of options at a high level. So in order to use the withholding tax functionality, you need to check this use withholding tax checkbox. If you do not check this checkbox, then you cannot use withholding tax for any suppliers. Okay, that's the first thing. So check this checkbox so that you can use the withholding tax for any kind of supplier. So once you check this checkbox, so at a supplier site level also withholding tax will be enabled. And at a supplier site, you need to assign the withholding tax code only for those suppliers, okay, wherein you want to use the withholding tax functionality. You need to associate the withholding tax code. If you associate the withholding tax code, again there are some other screens wherein you need to create the withholding tax, so that I can explain you at later point in time. But at a high level, you create withholding tax codes and associate those withholding tax codes to the to those suppliers. So whenever you create an invoice for that particular supplier, then automatically system will calculate withholding tax based on the percentage associated with that particular withholding tax code. So withholding tax code name could be something like 10% WHT. So that is the name of the code. You associate the 10% WHT to that particular supplier. So whenever you create an invoice for that particular supplier, automatically for that particular withholding tax code of 10% WHT, the percentage is 10%. So system will calculate 10% and 1,000 will be withheld. So for those suppliers, wherein you do not want to calculate any withholding tax. Don't associate the withholding tax code. Okay, now the question is like, what are the different kind of suppliers where I need to calculate the withholding tax, and for what are the suppliers where I should not calculate withholding tax? You need not break your head. That is the business decision, and business users will read the law and find out who are the suppliers who are selling goods to us, okay, or from whom we are purchasing, and what is their tax law, and what should we do. You need not break your head. That is the business decision. Okay.
Okay. Okay.
So there are a couple of things. At what stage you want to calculate the withholding tax? Whether you want to calculate when you are validating the invoice, or whether you want to calculate withholding at the time of payment, because there are certain laws says that do not calculate withholding tax at the invoice validation. Calculate at a payment time, something like that. So, but we go with the at invoice validation time. In India, it is at invoice validation time we need to calculate withholding tax, and there is something called withholding invoice. So at what stage you want to calculate create the withholding tax invoice. So again, I'll explain you this two things: the how system will calculate the withholding tax and how system will generate the withholding tax invoice when we get into the different kinds of invoices. So when we get into the withholding tax invoice, I'll come to this particular screen. I'll again explain you these concepts. Okay. And what is the default invoice currency for suppliers? You can say INR. And what is the default pay group? You can say standard. And pay date terms on what is the default pay date, due date, and what is the default payment terms, 30 days. You can say 30 net. That's it. Save this. Okay. So that completes the